Our Bible word is Matthew 6, verses 3 to 4. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So the issue here is, how do you interpret the law and understand the law? Because Matthew's gospel, it was written for a community of Jewish Christians. For them, Jesus was the fulfillment of the law. He's the new Moses. He's the one with supreme authority to interpret the law, to explain what the law means. Not the scribes, not the Pharisees, because the way they apply the law and interpret the law is wrong. If we go to chapter 5, verses 20, there Jesus says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." So the righteousness of followers of Jesus must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. So what is this righteousness that Jesus speaks of? Well, it has to do with what's the intention of the law? How must we live? Because in chapters 5 to 7, Jesus is giving the law of the new covenant. If we look at Matthew's structure overall, Jesus as the new Moses gives 5 discourses. There's chapters 5 to 7, the Sermon on the Mount, then there's the commissioning of the 12, there's also the other discourses. They imitate the 5 books of Moses, where Jesus lays down the law for the people of the new covenant. So yeah, we're on the Sermon on the Mount. It's about how do you interpret and apply the law. Jesus gives the correct interpretation, not the scribes or Pharisees. And like Jesus says here, your righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. It's about having a real relationship with God. It's not doing things for show. It's about, there's this vertical dimension where we have a relationship with God, our Father, but it's not separate from how we relate on the horizontal dimension with our neighbors, with our fellow human beings. They cannot be separated. If you read chapters 5 to 7, they are connected. Our relationship with God, the quality of it is determined by the quality that we foster with our relationship with our fellow human beings. And it's about doing things for the real reason and not being pretentious. And this is what Matthew writes here. That's the way he presents Jesus. The scribes and the Pharisees, they are pretentious. They do not have this genuine, deep-seated relationship with God, this deep piety that's done out of this genuine faith. Because also in other places, in our present pericope in chapter 6, again, it's about acts of piety. How do you perform your acts of piety? Because it's about almsgiving. It's about how you pray. And later on, it's about how you fast. So if we go to chapter 6, verse 5, it's on prayer. It says, "And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." So they're pretentious. They want to create a good impression. So Jesus says, yeah, they have their reward. Other people see them and are impressed. They supposedly are pious, but in God's eyes, they don't receive a reward. Also, if we go to verses 16, "Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." Again, people do things to be seen. Also, if we go to chapter 23, there's the similar things that happen where Jesus speaks against the scribes and Pharisees. If we go to verses 5 to 7, it says there, "But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad, Phylacteries are those things that the Jews wear on their foreheads with straps. It contains little parchments with scripture written on them. So it's, the modern equivalent is maybe wearing a cross around your neck. That's this big cross. You boast your Christian status, that you're very pious and very Christian. So something similar in the world of Jesus. They make their phylacteries broad, big, so everybody can see how law observant they are. And enlarge the borders of their garments. On the borders of garments, that's where those little tassels were situated. That also was a sign that every Jewish male had to wear. It was to remind you of God's commandments. It shows your piety also as a Jewish person. Now, Jesus also says, well, they make that also very big. So, to show off their piety. In verse 6, it says, they love the best places at feasts, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. In other words, teacher, teacher. Also, if we go to verses 23 to 24, it says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Now, the word hypocrite, the Greek word hypokrites behind it, it can possibly be better translated as pretender, was a play actor. So they are the scribes and Pharisees, they are pretenders. They put on a show for others to show off their piety. So, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, or we can say pretenders. For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. So in other words, Jesus, so they project this piety, and now they focus on little things, but they say you forget the most important things of how to interpret and apply the law. And what's the most important things? Justice and mercy and have faith. These are the crucial things of the law. That is how you must approach the law. It's about human well-being, relationships with others. That's what you must promote or focus on. Then, of course, there's also the love commandment. Remember where Jesus is in Jerusalem and he's challenged. They ask him, what's the greatest commandment? Jesus says it's the commandment to love God, love your heart, soul, and mind. But also another commandment that's just as important is to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's the heart of the law for Jesus. That's how the proper interpretation and application of the law. And that also builds on that, what Jesus says elsewhere, is that, what's the weightier matters of the law? It's justice and mercy and faith. So it's, what's the intention of the law? And Jesus brings the true interpretation and intention of the law. Like Jesus also says in the next verse, verse 24, blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. So in other words, the Pharisees and the scribes, they are so focused, for example, on the little things. They scrupulously observe the little things, removing all the gnats or straining the gnats so they won't eat it by accident. Little insects, small, tiny little insects. But then it goes on, you swallow a camel. In other words, it's just a way, this hyperbole of saying, you pay so much attention to the small stuff, but the really big important stuff you neglect, you don't focus on it. You swallow a camel. So that's what our present pericope also looks at. It's the pretension of the scribes and the Pharisees. And of course, it's from chapter 6, verses 1 to 4, it's about almsgiving. And almsgiving, it was a basic act of piety. It was done for the sake of the poor. There was even this little receptacle in the temple where you can offer money that must go to the poor. So if we go to verse 1, chapter 6, verse 1, Jesus says there, again, take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. In other words, don't be a pretender. You will have your reward from people. They will see you. They will acknowledge you. But from God, you get nothing. Then verses 2, it says, therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Again, it's about drawing attention to yourself. It's not about having this genuine, deep-seated faith and commitment to God, genuine piety that's born from authenticity, from doing it for the real and true reasons. And then we come to our Bible word. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deeds may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So the thing is, it's between you and God. That's where genuine faith and where genuine piety comes from. God, do your things in secret. Don't make it known. Don't blow a trumpet in the synagogue, etc. God sees you anyway, and God sees your heart. And if you do it for the right reasons, God will reward you.